Denizen of the Wood, Aos Si, rank Pawn. The most commonly seen quadruped fairy of Avalon. They are known to be slightly moody, but universally love to play tricks. Souls are their main source of sustenance, and they usually live off the negative vibes acquired from tormenting humans and wisps. They also vary in size. Aos Si, who have lived for longer periods, tend to be larger and significantly more dangerous. Among fairies, they are an inferior breed with no special abilities to speak of, but their basic physical strength still averages with that of an adult human. As they use both weapons and magic, they can pose a significant threat in their own right. That being said, most have a poor sense of sight, hearing, and smell, and can thus usually be avoided by simply hiding. They are usually tasked with minor guard duty, instructed to report anything suspicious to their commanding fairy officers. Being discovered by one could quickly result in a whole fairy army coming to their aid, so it is usually best to avoid confrontation when unnecessary. Haphazard Shooter, Bogie, rank Pawn. A quadruped fairy wielding a cannon created with Avalonian weaponsmithing, desperate for any opportunity to open fire, and usually will do so the instant an enemy is spotted. The cannon has poor accuracy and bogies have terrible aim, but the ammunition it uses can be quite damaging in the off chance it hits. As the shots themselves are also not particularly fast, they can be safely avoided if one watches the trajectory closely. Bogie are primarily tasked to find humans and lure them to larger groups of fairies. To accomplish this, they station themselves in one spot, waiting for passerby. Of course, they're not good at waiting and usually start blasting away for some reason before long enough. The ammunition they use is relatively simple to make, so they essentially never run out. If spotted, it's advantageous to take them out of the picture early. Devious Trapper, Leipreachan, rank Pawn. A shrewd fairy excelling at planting traps around Avalon to snatch up the unsuspecting. Most are well versed in the forest byways, knowing just the inconspicuous spots to set a trap for maximum effect. A true nuisance of a fairy. Likely due to the fact that their principal targets are humans and wisps, they often will place jewels or other shiny objects near the traps as bait. Some are even cunning enough to make their own treasure chest and then booby-trap the area around it. The unknowing of these admonishable habits think of the Leipreachan as a safekeeper of treasure and believe them to know where buried gold and other treasures may be hidden. The traps they make are built using wood straight from the forest, meaning there is no shortage of materials. This has made it possible for the Leipreachans to build an absurd amount of traps in the forest. Some wild fairies of the forest have even taken to copying Leipreachans in recent years, leaving traps in all sorts of strange places. Stern Defender, Spriggan, rank Pawn. A quadruped fairy that uses a large shield to protect itself and other fairies from enemy attacks. Receiving formal training from its biped seniors, it is capable of fending off most attacks from the front. Unfortunately, just managing that requires most of its concentration, which also means it is rarely successful in being of any help to its allies. It also seems so fixated on protecting itself that it forgets to attack. Spriggan's shield were forged from adamant ore during Avalon's feudal period. The shields are maintained by the Spriggans collectively and kept in near flawless condition. If any are ever lost, it is considered the group's responsibility. The curly tip design at the shield's top often snags on things in the forest, and most Spriggans wish it could be removed. Wandering Sharpshooter, Pixie, rank Pawn. A fairy that randomly formed large wings that allow it to fly freely in the sky. Normally they spend their time patrolling Avalon from the skies, swooping down to alert the other fairies of anything suspicious they may come across. Their wings also prove useful for carrying supplies to different parts of the forest. As fighters, they are fairly strong, picking out unsuspecting prey from the sky with the cannon latched on them. Still, as if in exchange for their wings, Their bodies are frail, and most can be knocked out of the air with a single well-placed hit. What causes these sudden wing growths in fairies has been researched, but no conclusive evidence has been discovered. As such, most attempts to create more pixies are done through mere guesswork, and few have been successful so far, making pixies relatively rare. Stalwart Guardian, Fomhorach, rank Jade Knight. An elite biped fairy that uses a large spear in their right hand and sturdy shield their left. Skilled in reading an enemy's movement, they have won their way through many battles by blocking an incoming attack, making an opening, and answering with a swift jab of their spear. Because of their emphasis on defense, they are often called gatekeepers by other fairies, which is also likely related to why many of them are assigned guard duty around fairy fortresses. Their shield is forged with a precious metal called orichalcum, and greatly surpasses the defensive abilities of shields used by common fairies. Due to this metal's scarcity, not many of these shields exist, making Fomhorach themselves quite rare. Most Fomhorach are veteran fighters who have been around since Avalon's feudal era. Another reason for being called gatekeepers likely comes from their dedication to law and servitude. They show no hesitation to strike down swift justice on any resident of Avalon causing disorder, even if it were a fellow fairy. Speared Hunter, Bananach, rank Tourmaline Knight. A biped fairy that uses a spear its own height. Developing from quadrupeds after absorbing sufficient energy, they are seated relatively high along the fairy hierarchy, often are placed within units of lower-ranking fairies to step in when needed. Bananachs possess significant strength which they display through powerful jabs to keep their proximity in check. The wings on their back enable flight, and switching their strategy to a succession of aerial strikes is not uncommon. Aggressive by nature, once they have initiated their attack, they will not cease assault on a target until it has been completely incapacitated, lunging their massive bodies at their opponent to physically overwhelm them. The persistence with which they go after their opponent has likened them to an enraged demon among the other fairies, and yet they also seem to have a strong sense of pride, insisting on fighting their enemies head-on. Apprentice Clown, Amadan, rank Amber Knight. A mischievous clown in training, they belong to the Amadan circus troupe, where they used to learn under Amadan until he lost his mind. Since then, they have taken over his work as general overseer of Fairyland Tower, where they are in charge of collecting negative vibes via wisp torment. While still learning to be a clown, they have displayed expert skill in turning wisp torment into a performance art, and accumulated a great amount of negative vibes due to it. Though relatively weak for a fairy, they are devious schemers, always thinking of new tricks to try, each one almost unanimously translatable to an effective method of wisp torment. Using the wisp energy they have collected, they have learned how to create barriers for themselves, but overall they're not very threatening in battle. Fledgling Mage, Gean Canach, rank Pawn. A quadruped fairy wizard with a pointy hat. While still being a lesser fairy, they have acquired a few useful spells, including teleportation and duplication. Their offensive arsenal may not be as powerful as that of higher-ranking fairies, but it generally serves its purposes. Their trademark in combat is to trap their enemy and make them suffer slowly. To their opponent's advantage, they're not especially quick spellcasters. They are quite studious and learn most fairy magic fundamentals under biped wizard fairies known as Spriggan, but they are always seeking out additional knowledge, sometimes going as far as to dig through the forgotten belongings of humans who have disappeared here. Their triangle hat is said to be them mimicking human culture in a show of respect for their great wizards of legend. On a strange side note, they cast spells in a low, soft voice that has been likened to whispering sweet nothings to an admirer.